today is that no one really reads, right? Every single word on a document, every single word on a, Jessica, did I lose you?
I'm here.
Okay, good. No, sorry. A little pop-up came on my screen that said something about connecting to the cloud or something, which I don't have.
No.
Okay.
That was on my end, sorry.
Oh, good. Okay, no, that's fine. So some of the behavior we know today is that people just do not read every single word of anything anymore, right? You're scrolling through your phone, you're scanning things, even the newspaper, we don't necessarily read every single word. So we need to make sure that we optimize our resume to account for all of that. The other thing that we know today is that people spend something like 7 seconds reading a resume. And anyone that's hired or has been in a position where you're interviewing people, how when you get a stack of resumes, how quickly you go through those. So again, another reason why your resume needs to be strong and needs to stand out. So a strong resume balances content and formatting to present your experience in an impactful and easily scannable way. And we're going to go through what that means. But first, we are going to take a look at what I call a bad resume. So Jessica, you have that in the chat, correct? And I'm going to also put it up on the screen so you guys can take a look. So what I want to do is, have everyone take a look at this. We'll have a few minutes to review the resume example. And then I want you to tell me what is missing, what could be improved, what isn't working about this resume. We'll then talk through those comments, and we're going to share some responses to those comments, things that we could have done better on that resume. But when you're looking at this resume, the bad resume, put yourself in the employer's shoes. What would you want to learn about this candidate that you're not learning from the document that they've provided? So here on the screen, if everybody can see, is the bad resume, but it is also in the chat in case you want to download it, get a closer look, print it, use it for however you want to use it. So I'll give you guys, we'll reconvene in 3 minutes. So take your time, take a look at this resume, think about what your comments are. You can put your comments in the chat, and then we'll reconvene and talk through those comments. Okay, we'll give everybody 1 more minute, and then we will start going through the comments. How are we looking so far, Jessica?
Actually, it was a little bit delayed sharing that in the chat, so if we could give everyone just a couple minutes, that would be great. And then I'm just going to go through the chat now.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we have a lot of comments in the chat about the resume.
Okay.
And people can keep adding their comments if they want to.
Great.
But yeah, Catherine says, very crowded layout, too much information to sift through.
Right.
Joan says, too many bullets for every job.
Totally right.
Judith says, no phone or LinkedIn info. Netta says, difficult to read quickly or scan. Rebecca says, need opening summary. Joan says, font sizes of bullets inconsistent. Scott says, it looks like a lot like my resume format. I'm glad I'm here. Let's see. C. Mead, I'm not sure. Oh, is it Christine? Skills at the bottom, not the top. Cosby says, poor spacing, looks bulky. Rebecca says, could use numbers when possible, increases sales by how much?
Right.
Judith says, I don't want to read this. Too much work for me, and I have another 60 resumes in my pile.
Aha. Love that comment. That's a good one.
Yeah, so that's all the comments I have so far.
So all of those are dead on. So one of the things that we know about, first of all, our perception of resumes is that you want it to be visually appealing. It doesn't have to be a fancy design, but when you look at this resume, the first thing you think of is, ugh, it's like no margins, you know, side to side, content jammed in, and then missing some of the good stuff, right? Like missing all the right contact information, missing a summary or sort of a statement about who this person is. Doesn't have good consistent format throughout. You know, there was a mention of different font sizes and different types of fonts, all bullets, which is I call that, you know, bullet fatigue. I don't want to read any of it because I just don't want, nothing is standing out. There aren't good data points. I think someone mentioned, you know, what are the numbers? What are the figures? How did this person improve sales? You want to see those factual backup type of pieces of information in a resume. And it's really not easy to scan. I love what you said about, you know, I've got 60 more resumes. Yeah, right. This one gets tossed because it's just too difficult to figure out what it is that this person does and what it is that they could offer, right? So, you know, the other thing that it doesn't take advantage of is any keywords that could help this person, you know, in their job search, be able to align better with different job requirements. So there's a lot that's missing here, but the good news is that we have a good version. So we've looked at the bad version. Now we're going to look at the good version. So let's go through some resume best practices here. So this is the same person, you know, theoretically, it's obviously a made-up person, Patricia Foster. And one of the things you notice right off the bat is that this visually is a lot easier to absorb, right? We've got good white space, we've got good breathing room. Everything isn't jammed in. It's not, you know, bleeding right to the edge of the page. We've got space between all of the different sections. So you've got your front page, the first page on the left, and obviously second page on the right. And one of the things I want to start by talking about is the top 1/3. So the top 1/3 is everything above that section that says professional experience. So that's the person's contact information at the top, and then all of the information underneath that, right below areas of expertise. That's the top 1/3. So that is the most valuable real estate on your resume. And we're going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but I want you guys to notice how that really consolidates everything someone needs to know about Patricia Foster right at the top. But the first thing, besides a clean, concise layout and the breathing room, is that this resume is able to be scanned easily, right? So you can scan through and be able to read easily the things that are important to, and that stand out. But the other thing is that if you don't have time to read through, that top 1/3 should really tell the story about Patricia Foster. So let's start by talking about the header. So the contact information, right? Your name, your contact, your email, your phone number, your LinkedIn URL. You know, I think I actually have a tighter view of this. Yes, okay. Yes. All right. So what I just want to also mention, besides a clean and concise layout, we want to make sure we keep our resumes to 2 pages maximum. If you've been working for less than 10 years, you can fit everything on 1 page, especially a recent graduate or someone that's been, you know, still very early in the career can stick to 1 page. But for the rest of us, it's 2 pages, and it really shouldn't go much over that, because people tend to tune out after 2 pages. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this resume in particular uses the Calibri font. I like to focus on either using Calibri or Cambria for resumes. And why? Because they look great on screen. They look great printed. A lot of people still print resumes to review them. And the other thing is that they cross platforms very well without getting messed up, so corrupted or anything like that. So no matter if you're sending a resume, you know, and you have a version of a program and someone else has a different version of a program, or it's through email or whatever, these are fonts that Calibri and Cambria are fonts that really work well across platforms, and they provide an updated sort of contemporary feel for your resume. I'll share with you guys a funny story. So Calibri is sort of today's Arial font. You know, we used to use Arial as sort of our more contemporary font. This is a little less clunky, but I heard someone say recently that Times New Roman is what they call the sweatpants of fonts. So Calibri is our contemporary font, and Cambria is the updated version of Times New Roman. So you want to make sure you're using some of these more updated fonts for your resume. And then this is that top 1/3. So I want to deep dive into this a little bit more with you guys. So what do we notice about the header? So we're not using Patricia Foster's street address. We don't need to include that anymore. These days, your geographic location is important, but it doesn't have to give your street address. And that's for a couple reasons. One is privacy, right? You don't really need to have your personal address on, you know, floating around online. And the other reason is no one's going to send you a letter. So if anything's coming, it's coming via email. So you don't need to have your street address. The other thing is to keep things, again, in the spirit of keeping things scannable, making sure things are easy to read. We don't need to explain things. Like, for example, when you have your email address, you can just put your email address. You don't need to put the word email and then your email address. You don't need to put the word cell phone and then your phone number. It's understood that these are the ways to contact you, and people know what those things are. So it just helps keep things on a really clean and not cluttered basis. You see also that we're including Patricia Foster's LinkedIn URL. So someone can go and find her on LinkedIn really easily by just typing in that, that URL. You can even make that a hot link if you want. What are the things that we're not including here besides your, besides those extra words? We're not including parentheses around the area code. There may be some of us in this meeting who remember the days where you only had to dial the first 7 digits, but now you have to dial all of them. So we're not including parentheses any longer. So just the phone number without all that. Again, it just helps keep things really clean. The next item below this header is the title. So in this case of Patricia Foster, this is her professional title. Patricia Foster is a real estate agent. So she wanted to make sure that she explained the skills and the strengths that she brings to her job and wanted to communicate who she is as a professional. So her descriptive words in her title are sales leader, client management, and communications expert. Those were the things that Patricia really felt clearly defined who she was as a professional. So think about what your title might be. It's not the job you have currently or the job you had most recently. It's who you are today, what it is that you do. Maybe you are a software engineer. That's pretty straightforward. But maybe you're a software engineer with a specialty in, I'm making this up, healthcare, or You have a background in startups and innovation. So think about the types of descriptors that you would use to create your own professional title. And this is going to come into play when we talk about LinkedIn next week as well. Underneath the title, we have a paragraph, and this paragraph is a summary in 3-ish, 4 sentences of who Patricia Foster is, what are her strengths, what are her skills, what is the value that she has to offer. This is the summary of Patricia Foster's entire career and the things that she can offer to a potential employer. I will tell you, as someone who writes resumes, this is the hardest thing to write. But it is the most important because it really helps an employer. Again, remember those 7 seconds? It helps somebody very quickly understand right away, hey, who is Patricia and what could she do for my organization? So you want to think about all of the things that you bring to your job or you have brought through your career and focus on how you could bring a paragraph together and describe all those things to a potential employer. And then below that, you see areas of expertise. So the areas of expertise complement, they have a twofold purpose. One is to complement the paragraph up above. So there's some things in these areas of expertise that we don't necessarily need to explain further. For example, market research. You know, Patricia Foster, as a real estate agent, needs to do market research on properties and understand what's available. She also needs to generate leads to keep the pipeline filled. She needs to analyze her clients to make sure she understands what can they afford? What is it that they want? How can she make sure she shows them the right properties? And then doing things like contract development and negotiation, you know, the purchase and sale, the final agreements, all of the paperwork that goes around being a real estate agent, but also communicating with her clients, presenting to clients, holding events like open houses or other types of things that really help her further her business. So those are her areas of expertise. They complement what goes on up above, but they don't repeat what goes on up above. So that's key, that you're making sure that each of these sections, the title, the paragraph, the areas of expertise, they are individual, but yet they all hang together. They're not repeating anything or being redundant. The second purpose for areas of expertise is that so that you can add keywords. We talked about this a little bit before, but so that you can add keywords that help you align your skills with the types of roles that you're looking for. So this whole section, this is your top 1/3, the most valuable real estate. This, if someone only reads this on your resume, they should get it. They should understand who you are and what it is that you have to offer. Now, if they keep reading and go through the chronological pieces, which we're going to do in a second, that will prove out what we just told them up above. Basically, what we're trying to do is do the work for the person. Give them the information they need to understand who you are and what it is that you have to offer, without having to pick through all of your experience to try to figure out, like, what is it that this person does? Oh, I see, she did this over here at this job and this over here at that job. We don't want them to build the narrative of who you are. We want to deliver it to them right at the top. So that is your top 1/3. And I'm going to go to the next slide just to make sure I covered everything. Geographic location, we talked about that. Your title being strong and descriptive. The professional summary, that's your story. Your areas of expertise. Oh, this is a good thing. So I don't know if anyone's heard of the program JobScan. And I want to mention this for a minute. So when you're thinking about your areas of expertise, your keywords, you can also use this program called JobScan to review your resume. And this is kind of a neat tool. So what it allows you to do is, once you have your resume fully built and up to date, say you're applying for a job or you're interested in applying for a job, it allows you to put that job posting in as well as your resume. It acts like a talent management system. If you guys have been, you know, obviously on the job search for a little bit, you'll know what the ATS is. But it will help you pinpoint some areas that you might be missing in your resume. Now, JobScan is, I think they give 5 free scans, but if you recommend to somebody else or you connect with somebody else that needs job scans, you get 5 more. I mean, think about how many times you might scan through to make sure you're kind of heading in the right direction. It's not the silver bullet. It's not the answer to everything, but what it is just a little more information that helps you understand how you might be stacking up next to some of these requirements in a particular job. So let's talk about the section below that top 1/3. This is where you want to make sure you are explaining in good detail, but not too much, in good detail about your professional experience, right? All of the chronological things that you have done throughout your career. And yes, most people do still prefer a chronological resume. There is another format called functional resume. We're not going to go through that here today, but that tends to be something that groups your skills in a different way. Usually for people use a functional resume when they're looking to completely shift and change careers, and they really want to highlight their expertise versus some of the experience they've had, which might not necessarily be relevant to what they want to do next. So in the job history, in your chronological experience, you want to make sure that you are giving the opportunity to explain who you are and what it is that you have done in your career, right? So in this case, you'll notice that we use the company name over to the left and the location. And then we put the dates over on the right. And the idea here, again, we talked earlier about format and making things easy to scan and easy to read. Obviously, our eye reads left to right, and this also creates a really nice balance for your resume. So the company name, the location, and then your title. Now, you can sort of fool around with this however it works best for you, but the idea is that where you worked and what you did is more important necessarily than the time you worked there. It's not to say that the time you worked there is not important, but it's just to balance it out, and scan through. That's the important stuff. That's what you want to be sticking out. Now you'll notice on the dates, what didn't I include? Months. Again, in the spirit of clean, concise, easy to scan, we don't need to bog down a resume with months that you were there. Just the years are okay. But I do want to mention to you guys that you should keep that information somewhere, because oftentimes, and I'm sure you know this from doing your own job searches, but oftentimes a job application will require you to add the months that you were at a particular place. So don't necessarily lose that information. It just doesn't need to go on the master copy of your resume. So the job should be listed in two ways. So we've got in this case, Patricia Foster, International Real Estate Office. And her title was Residential Sales and Listing Real Estate Agent, okay? Then you see that paragraph below that. This is where we explain in a big picture what the role was. Not the day-to-day tasks, not all the little things that had to get done, but what are the big picture descriptor, what is the big picture description of this role and how it fit into the organization and what kind of impact it had. So this is where we kind of think about high level copy. That's kind of a, not getting into the everyday detail, but keeping things very high level, big picture. And then we save the bullets. Remember on the bad resume, how the whole thing was bulleted and how you just kind of wanted to tune right out? Well, we save the bullets in this case for the successes and achievements. And in particular, that helps some of these things stand out a little bit more. So in Patricia Foster's case, she achieved $10 million in residential real estate sales since 2013. That's a big number for one person. We want that to really stand out. So we're going to keep that as a bullet. And we also want to make sure that we can communicate the other things that she's good at. Achieving faster sales. How does she do it? She's, a strategic advisor for techniques and strategies to help make properties appealing to potential buyers. Not every single one of your accomplishments has to have a metric associated with it. Obviously, those make them a little bit stronger when there's a number or percentage of improvement or growth or savings or anything like that. But they can also be talking about things that you do that make the place better place, make a process more efficient, make a, maybe you're somebody that, even though it isn't in your title, you are the default go-to person for everyone in the office, because you have a lot of they have a lot of questions, and you've been there a long time. You understand the way the place operates. So think about all of the things that you've done in each of your roles, and think about the ones that would help really explain your achievements and successes in a nice variety too. You should think about these individually and not as like the same thing, but for a different, what I'm trying to say is having a nice variety of achievements that show the breadth of your experience is better than repeating something that's you've done in each of your roles. So the success bullets are really important, and we'll talk later about using language to help boost those up a little bit. I think also it's really important to avoid stuffing your resume with responsibilities. And that's why we talk about that big picture language, that high level description of your role, not necessarily just the things that you've done, but the successes that you've had. And that helps a potential employer understand how you can have a positive impact at their company. Okay, so let's, and you'll see how we balance this. You know, obviously the most recent experience was at the International Realty office. And then prior to that, she worked at a different company. So the same format goes, you know, obviously throughout the chronological aspect of your resume. And then as you get further down your resume, you want to consolidate your education and maybe some other things. Maybe professional development could go in here as well. You want to talk about your volunteer experience, or maybe you have awards or a license or certifications. This is the place where a lot of this belongs. If you have technical skills, those could also be included. If you're someone who's in technology, you might have a separate section altogether for that. But notice how we're using both the fully written out title for your degree as well as the abbreviation. That's because, again, in the spirit of scannability and also making sure we're capturing any important keywords, we want to make sure we're capturing the fact if a job is looking for a Bachelor of Science or a BS. So we want to make sure we have both of those included in here. You'll notice we didn't put any dates on the education. Well, in these days, it is not as important when you went to school, but that you did. So we didn't necessarily need to include those dates. And also, if you're concerned about having someone pinpoint your age, you can leave those dates off.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
We did have a question come in. Do you have a second to?
Of course, let's hear it.
Okay, so it was, Joan is asking, what if you have had more than one title at the same company for over 7 years? How do you list that?
Yes, okay, good question. So the way I would do that is, and I'm gonna sort of, I can't highlight that. Okay, forget it. What I would do there is I would include the company name in your most recent title as the first header. And then below that, I would include your second title in after this paragraph, after the bullets. So you want to talk about your most recent title and your experience, and then you want to you share your next, the previous title and the dates, so that you're really communicating your progression through that company. You don't necessarily need to include the company name again with that second entry, but just the title that you had and the dates. Does that help? And I'm going to make, yes, okay, good. I'm going to make a note to myself about that, because I want to make sure, I actually want to add that into a example.
And would you add bullets to that too?
Yes, I would treat it just like I did. I would treat it exactly like this first entry with the International Realty office. I would just, because the idea is you had a different job when you first started with the company, and then you moved up to another position, or even if you just took a lateral change, the idea is that you had progression within that company. And it is very important to reference that and to communicate that in your resume.
Okay. Another question came in too related to the education, which is on the next slide. Do you feel it's necessary to add the major field of study if it doesn't apply to the job you are applying for?
I love that question, because how many of us went to school for whatever it is that we're doing now? Very few, right? I do think it's important to make sure that you communicate everything about your degree. So, you know, in the case of Patricia Foster, look at her. She went to school for elementary education, but now she's a real estate agent. So I would include everything. It's really up to you about the dates, but I would include the description of your degree. It can also be a talking point. You know, if someone looked at because here's what folks are going to look at. They're going to look at that top 1/3 and they're going to flip down and want to see where you went to school. That's kind of the way a lot of people read through resumes very quickly. So there could be some interesting aspects that you might be able to talk through when you have an interview. Any other ones, Jessica?
There was another one that came in, if you have time for one more here.
Yeah.
Netta is asking, should recent grads still include education at the bottom, or could it be added to the top? Recent grads.
Okay, recent grads. So if you are just graduated, absolutely it belongs at the top. So that's an excellent question. It belongs at the top because that's really your most recent experience. If you think about your chronology, right? Your most recent experience is that you've just graduated, and that should be at the top. You can also include some of your relevant coursework that you've finished. Maybe any sort of societies or activities, or if you were involved with different things while you were in school, those are things you can add to that as well. Yes, definitely.
Okay. And then were you, the next one is about the previous screen as well. Were you going to add some time at the end for individual resume specific questions, or would you like to answer them now?
I will answer those at the end.
Okay. So
Great.
Go ahead.
Okay. So let's talk about those best practices again. So the job history, right? That's your employer, your title, and your description. In the case that we were talking about with recently graduated, that would be your education. Describe the job, then bullet out your key accomplishments. Include technical expertise, but only the most current. So if you're someone that, you know, learned how to program in Pascal 25 years ago, you could probably leave that off. But today you want to really communicate, you know, different programs that you use that help you do your job better. Or if you're somebody that's in the technical field and you need to, maybe you're a programmer. I mean, there's going to be all sorts of technical programs that you're going to want to include there. So, but only the most current and things that you really feel that you are an expert at. We talked about the education, how to list your degree. You can put in professional development if you've taken courses, any volunteer activities. Those are the things that help make this resume a full descriptive document, and your whole career, your whole narrative of your career. Let's talk a little bit about success language. I mentioned this at the beginning. Looking at these sentences, I see a lot of this in resumes, so I want to share this with you guys so that you can avoid doing this. These types of sentences: I'm a dedicated employee who's detail-oriented and dependable. Or I'm responsible for scheduling and maintaining accurate records. While these are good things, right? Being detail-oriented and dependable and being responsible for scheduling and maintaining accurate records. But what it doesn't tell me is what makes this person different or unique. What is their point of difference? So success language looks more like this. I'm a results-oriented manager who leads complex projects. Or I collaborate with cross-functional teams. Or I develop new processes to improve efficiency. These are action, sort of strong ways to describe the things that you do in your role. So if you're talking about being responsible and dedicated, or you are results-oriented, you're collaborative, and you are developing new things to improve efficiency, who do you think is more likely to be contacted for an interview? Here's some sample success language that I want to share with you guys. So some of these words that can help really boost up what you describe about yourself. These are sample action verbs. I like to call them action verbs. I led something. I managed it. I spearheaded it. I initiated it. Or I improved a thing. I streamlined a process. I achieved success in this way. Or I achieved a sales goal. I developed something. I directed it, implemented it, created it. These are strong verbs that help really boost up the successes that you have. So if you use this action-oriented language, this will help really give a stronger impact to your achievements and your strengths and your successes. Okay, so we're going to wrap up and talk about all these best practices that we just covered. And I'm going to share at the end a tips sheet, or Jessica is actually, that's going to give you an overview of what we talked about and something that you guys can follow as well. So keeping it clean, using a single font and bolding only the important stuff. Remember how that bad resume made us feel so like not interested in reading it? You want to make sure that you are making someone interested enough to read through. The top 1/3, we talked about how that's our most valuable real estate. You got to make it count, every single part of that top 1/3, that summary, that title, and those keywords and those in the areas of expertise. You want to make sure those really, really nail it. You want to just, in the chronological piece, describing your job, then using the bullets to highlight your achievements. Be concise. Make sure you eliminate extra words and descriptors. You can take out things like the, and you know, consider really kind of streamlining the way you describe yourself or your whatever you're writing about, you know, if it's your job or the accomplishments. Really streamline that language so it's easy to quickly zip through and get to the point. Using that success language that we just talked about, keeping it to 2 pages, and using Calibri or Cambria fonts. Those are the best practices that I have for you guys today. And also I want to talk about making sure your dates and titles are accurate. So, you know, a lot of times when we're developing our resume, we can be very close to it. We can kind of start to skim over things that we have been looking at for a long time. Go through and look at everything. Is the title accurate for your job? What is the date that you started there accurate? Because what you don't want is any sort of red flags. In today's job market, there are a lot of security checks and background checks. You want to make sure everything aligns on your resume. We talked about not including the months. Okay, proofread, right? So this is one of my most important tips. Proofread, proofread, proofread. At the beginning, we talked about how many resumes get submitted to job postings, right? The easiest way to get yours thrown into the garbage bin is to have a spelling error or a punctuation error. If you're not good at this, have someone else take a look. Get a second set of eyes, get a third set of eyes. Have somebody look at it who isn't as familiar with your resume. And do that anyway, even if you are good at it, because sometimes we, again, gloss over things that we've been looking at for a while. Also, you can share your resume with someone to have them critique it, someone that you can get good feedback from. Does this really represent me? Ask them those questions and ask them for some really ask them for critical feedback. You don't just want to hear that it's wonderful. You want to hear how it could be even better. Do a test print before sending off to employers. So I always do this with a resume before I finalize it, because you never know how things are going to show up on paper sometimes. And like I said before, people still do print. So when you are done with your new resume, then you want to update your LinkedIn profile with the same information. And we're going to talk about that next week in more detail, but it is necessary for your resume and your LinkedIn to hang together, telling that same story about you. Okay, so that is all I have for you guys today. I am going to leave my contact information up there so that you can see my email if you need it. And also my website is jobsearchdivas.com. Don't hesitate to reach out after the presentation if you have questions or if you need help with anything. But now I would like to hear what you have to say and hear about your questions. Mm. I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can see everybody. Yay, there you are. Okay.
Just to get started, I'll ask some of the things that came up earlier.
Sure.
Janice had asked for same job but different job titles. What if that previous title has nothing to do with the role you're looking at now? And how much detail? Just 1 to 2 sentence description, or also add bullet points?
I think that's kind of up to you, Janice. One of the things is thinking about the time frame that you were there as well. So if you were in that early role for a year, you can keep it really, really quick, really concise. But if you were there for 5 years, 6 years, there's going to be more to talk about, right? It's okay if it doesn't necessarily relate in exact or align exactly with another role that you're looking at now. This is to show that the experience that you have and why it's important. It all rolls up together in that narrative, right? So you can keep it cool.
Yeah, I have one job title right now. I was there for 15 years, but they really didn't believe in job titles. I just looked, I have my reviews. I was looking through them. Like, yeah. 3 of those years have no job titles blank. They didn't believe in job titles. So can I put a job title what I think I should have been called?
I think you should do that. Absolutely. Because there was a definition and a distinction between the different things that you did throughout that 17-year period, right? And that's something that you could certainly explain in an interview situation, that the company that you worked for didn't really have formal titles, but this is the nature of what I did during my time there.
All right, thank you.
I see somebody wants to know if you graduated magna or summa cum laude or academic awards, put that right under your degree. Definitely.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Elizabeth, Christine.
Hi.
Hi. It relates to the other lady's question about having 2 different job titles in one company. Yeah. And that I have that at Verizon, and the way I have it on my resume is I have it separated into 2 different, literally, like I'm talking about, it's the same company, but it's 2 different areas, right? It's company name, my title, the dates, the bullets, and the short summary, and then going, because it was a promotion into management, whereas the first job with Verizon was a customer service job. So I did 3 years in one and 5 in the other. So I literally have it as 2 separate jobs, but with the same company, with the bullets and the description.
Yep. That's right.
That's how I did it. Is that okay?
Yes, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. Let me see if I'm going to show you guys something. I'm going to screen share again. I'm going to get rid of the person's name so you don't need to. Okay. This is going to span over 2 pages, but I will screen share again for a second so that you can see what I'm going to show you. Here we go. So this person worked at this company, right? And their last role there was this North American brand leader. But you see how she worked there for 17 years also. And these were her different roles. And see how we did that, where we don't repeat the company name again, just the title. Here's the description of that role, the earlier role. Here's the bullet point. Okay, we're going to keep going down. Oh, then she was vice president of sales before that. See how we indented as well? We indented the sort of progressive dates, but we kept the total time frame over here on the right. Does that make sense, Janice? And also Christina, right? This is probably what you were talking about.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Good, good, good. Scott wants to know if we can have a copy of the good resume. Yes. I'll find that and put it into chat right now. Any other questions?
I think earlier on, Rebecca had asked if you needed to tailor your job your resume to the job do you have to tweak your resume for every job you apply for, or is it okay to have one version?
Great question. So I'm a big fan of not having multiple versions, and I'll tell you why. Because it becomes really hard to keep track of which one you use to apply for which job, and what you said about it, what you said about yourself. And so what I would recommend is really using, you know how we were looking very much at that top 1/3. That's your area where you can tweak. So our experience is our experience, right? We can't really walk away from what we've done in our lives, and we should explain that experience as well as we can in the chronological piece. But up there in that top 1/3, that's where you can make some adjustments. You could adjust the title, for example, to align more specifically with a particular role. You could add some different keywords, right? You could noodle around with that summary a little bit. If there was something you wanted to highlight about your experience that was more relevant to one position, but not as relevant to another. So I think that it's nicer to have that, to be able to, it's nicer, easier to have a master format and then have this other ability to tweak where you need to versus a completely new version every time. It'll make your life a lot easier if you use that format.
Okay, she said thank you.
You're welcome. I just put the sample resume in the chat as a PDF.
Yep. I can also email out all of these documents to people after as well, in case they can't see them.
So Joan is asking if you want the line separators. So this is a format that I use, and the reason I like the lines is because it gives the eye a little pause as you're scanning through. But if you don't want the lines, you don't have to use them. It's something that I use because I think it helps really break up some of the information, and it keeps you from, like, you know, reading right down to the bottom and not taking a break. But definitely it could be personal choice not to do so, but that's the reason I use the lines when I'm formatting resumes. Oh, Janice, that question, I can't. So I'm so glad you brought it up. So Janice wants to know, what about my Yahoo email address? Or not, maybe not yours, definitely. But so these days, it is probably ideal to have a email address that is either a Gmail or an Outlook or something that isn't necessarily one of the first email servers that ever existed. So an employer I was talking to at a conference about resume writing recently said, you know, I don't care how old people are, but if I see an email address that's Hotmail, Yahoo, or AOL, I've just figured out that you're over 50. Now,
right.
Personally, right. So personally, my personal self, I still use Hotmail for my personal, you know, I've had it since 1997 and I'm not getting rid of it. But if I were on a job search, I would want to use a more contemporary email address. And like this guy said to me, I don't care how old people are, but I've just figured it out, right? So there's plenty of other folks that might have reasons to not, you know, want to look at older candidates, and you want to make sure that you're keeping your options as open as they can be, right? So think about getting, you know, an address that's you know, more contemporary, Gmail, Outlook, one of those.
All right, thank you.
Netta has a very long question. I'm reading it. How can we make the summary section cohesive and concise, especially if it feels like we have a diverse range of experiences and interests and are applying to different types of jobs with different needs? If we're still trying to keep our options open and explore different careers. That's a challenge, yes, but there's gotta be common themes through everything you've done, and also common themes for your strengths and for your skills. So those are the things you want to really focus on in that paragraph. It's, and like I said, you can have some flexibility with that, and you might have one version for a specific type of job you're looking for, and you might have another version for another type of job. But really, there should be a lot of common themes in all of our careers, right? Like, even though we might have jumped around and done different things, there are probably a lot of strengths that we have that we could talk about that have applied to all of those roles. Any other questions? We're just at 2 o'clock, you guys. If you have anything else that you think of later, you can always email me.
I actually had a question.
Yes, Scott.
I was wondering, I've had kind of a series of roles that progressed in terms of responsibility and production goals, but the actual kind of day-to-day duties were pretty similar. So I struggle with getting kind of repetitive as I go through all of those. So curious what tips you have there.
Okay, that's great. So a very common problem, not a problem, it's actually a good thing. So oftentimes we have started our career and we have learned certain skills, and then we move to the next job. Of course we take those skills with us, right? But we add new skills. When you're building that narrative in your resume, keep that in mind. We don't need to repeat that thing that we took from the first job to the second job to the third job. We can say it once and focus on the other things that we added into our experience after that. Now, there may be a lot of commonalities, like you say, but there's probably also a progression in the things you did in your next role. Maybe you, even though it was similar to something in the previous role, maybe you took it a step further, or you built on your expertise, or you added something else that allowed you to, continue to evolve and progress. So really try to think about that story that you're trying to get across, and knowing that if we say those things once, we don't need to repeat them over and over again.
Okay, great.
Also think about, that area at the top, those areas of expertise. If there's something that you've done throughout your career that, is something you feel you're very expert at, you want to add it in there so that it's right up at the top too. That top piece, that top 1/3, if we think about that as the summary and the story, if people don't read any further, but if they keep reading, your chronological experience should prove out what we're telling them up there at the top. So think about it as this whole thing that hangs together, but that one piece informs the other in a way as well.
Okay.
I think there was another question, or maybe not. Oh, some good tips from Chris on updating your Hotmail to an Outlook address. That's great in the chat. Liz asks, if space is available, is it worth including a brief overview of a company you worked at? Thank you for this question. That's an excellent question. So my preference, and I think best practices, are really to make your resume focus on you and not spend real estate talking about the company. If someone wants to find out more about the company, there's a thing called Google that they can use. You could even hot link the name of the company to their web page if you wanted. But I wouldn't spend time or use your valuable real estate talking about them when it's really you need to be focusing on. Now, that being said, you can also weave something into that paragraph, into that descriptive paragraph about the company. Maybe you want to say, maybe your job was, I was a top sales leader for this pharmaceutical company based, with an international client base. There, you've put context around your role, and you've given a little information about the company without spending a ton of real estate describing what they do. I've seen resumes that have like 2 or 3 sentences devoted to what the company does, and you don't need to spend that kind of space or waste that kind of space talking about the company. So thank you for that question. Netta asks, is it okay to include volunteer or leadership experiences from college in addition to work experience? Netta, this is, again, I think, relevant, especially if it's a recent graduate. As we get further in our careers, some of the things that happened in college are not necessarily as relevant. So I would be careful about including too much from that time. It would be the same thing like internships. When you're first graduating from college, you keep your internships on your resume, but as you progress in your career, some of that stuff sort of, falls away. Okay, that might be all the questions we have. You think so, Jessica?
I don't see any more here. So I think that's it. You've covered everything. Thank you.
My goodness.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was a really excellent workshop. I did manage to record it, so I will send that out to everyone who registered after the meeting.
Can you send it to me too?
Yeah, sure, of course. I usually, yes. The other, I did share earlier on a link to next week's workshop, which is on LinkedIn, which is also hosted by Elizabeth Gross. And the following week on Wednesday, on August 12th, there will be a workshop on interview skills. So please join us for both of those. You can register on the library's calendar.
Yes. Thank you everybody for coming. Great to see you. And I hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.